Okay, let's dive in. You know that feeling, right? You're crushing it at work, hitting targets, maybe providing for your family exactly how you always envisioned. You feel successful, accomplished. But then you walk through the door at home and something feels off.
Yeah. Quiet, maybe. Disconnected.
It's especially noticeable around times like Father's Day, which is supposed to be about connection and appreciation, but can sometimes just highlight that gap.
It's a really common experience, isn't it? I mean, many men find navigating professional life, solving complex problems at work, achieving quantifiable results that feel straightforward, almost easier sometimes.
Predictable, even.
But the dynamics at home, that can feel like a much more complex, less predictable, and often more difficult challenge.
Absolutely. And we've been spending time with some powerful material from Jeremy Roadruck, particularly exploring his 24-hour marriage reset guide. In a recent video, specifically talking about this around Father's Day, he really digs into this dynamic, sharing some incredibly insightful frameworks and a client story that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that story really hits home. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the nature of this disconnect many men experience, understand what Jeremy's material identifies as, sort of the core issue preventing connection.
And explore his proposed surprisingly quick path towards more love and playfulness.
Exactly. And understand the argument presented in the source material for why taking action on this, perhaps especially now, could be profoundly impactful.
So let's start there with that quiet struggle. The drive to provide, to achieve professionally, it's a powerful force and often leads to significant external success. But what happens when that drive intersects with the home front?
Well, according to the material, you walk in the door and the energy you might hope for isn't there. The house might feel quiet. Maybe passion is missing from the relationship.
Right.
And life seems dominated by logistics, schedules, chores, everything that just has to get done. And beneath the surface, there's this internal tension.
Yeah, you don't want conflict. You don't want to plead for attention, but your marriage doesn't feel truly fulfilling. It's not meeting some fundamental needs for connection.
And the source points to a common, almost automatic strategy many guys fall into, doesn't it? This belief that if they just work harder, make more money, or simply focus all their energy on making everyone else happy,
That somehow.
magically their own needs for connection, intimacy, or appreciation will just get met as a byproduct.
It's a strategy rooted in that deep-seated drive to provide and solve, but as Jeremy's material explains, it often completely misses the actual core issue in the relationship dynamic.
Totally. And this material highlights that for high-achieving men, there's often this profound, often silent struggle around even knowing how to articulate or ask for what they need in the relationship. They're so used to being the rescuer or the solver, they lose touch with expressing their own vulnerability or needs.
The anecdote shared in the source about the client doing a 5 to Thrive exercise really illustrates this point powerfully.
It really does. Here's this highly successful man, late 30s, early 40s maybe, sitting down to think about what he needs to thrive in his marriage. Not what his wife needs or the kids need, but him.
Just him.
And he has this startling realization that no one had ever asked him that question in his entire life. What do you need to be your absolute best version of yourself?
Wow.
The material suggests this shows how deeply ingrained the pattern of focusing outward can become, sometimes burying a man's own sense of his needs in the relationship.
That's a heavy thought. Okay, let's connect this general struggle to a specific example provided in the source material, the story of a client named Jason.
Right. The source describes Jason as brilliant, driven, successful, a really positive guy by all external measures. But despite all that, his marriage was in a very difficult place.
Can you describe the situation he was in according to the source? What did that look like?
According to Jeremy's account, Jason and his wife had essentially become great roommates. The passion had completely vanished from the relationship. It had been sexless for a significant period, and his wife had actually moved out of their shared bedroom and started sleeping in their daughter's room.
Oof. That sounds incredibly lonely and isolating for Jason.
It was. The source describes him as feeling like he was constantly trying to reach his wife, trying to connect, but feeling like she was putting up walls, creating resistance, barriers.
Just hitting a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He felt like he was just losing ground, constantly pushing against something, and honestly just burned out from the effort of pretending things were okay when they clearly weren't.
But the material is clear that he didn't want the marriage to end. He didn't want divorce.
Not at all. He loved his wife and absolutely did not want a divorce. But he also knew, deep down, that he couldn't continue living in a marriage where he felt merely tolerated, or one that completely lacked intimacy.
Understandable.
His initial thoughts, understandably, went to wondering if he was somehow broken, or if she was intentionally withholding affection or connection, trying to figure out why.
Which brings us to what the source material presents as the core insight Jason discovered, a concept Jeremy Roadruck refers to as outpacing. This seems like the crucial turning point.
It really is. The material explains that the truth Jason discovered was far simpler and more powerful than those initial fears of someone being fundamentally broken. It wasn't about fault like that.
So how does the source define or explain this concept of outpacing? What does that mean?
The source describes outpacing as precisely that masculine drive we discussed earlier, the instinct to achieve, to solve problems, to fix situations.
That same drive that works so well elsewhere.
Right. While incredibly effective in the professional world or tackling external challenges, this drive, when misapplied to the dynamic within a marriage, can actually create the very wall, the very distance that you're trying to overcome.
How so?
You're operating from a place of trying to solve the problem of disconnection. But that approach, according to the source, can be counterproductive. It lands wrong.
So it's not about whether you want connection, but the energy or the approach you bring to trying to achieve it, that can be the issue, the how.
Precisely. The critical insight, as highlighted in the material, is this. She needs safety first, not solutions or attempts to fix the relationship like a project.
Safety first.
Her feminine heart, the source suggests, craves emotional trust, feeling deeply safe, above all else.
Safety first, not being fixed, not being managed.
Yes. The force emphasizes that when she feels genuinely safe, and this means feeling understood, cherished, not pressured, not like she's being evaluated or fixed, that's when the mental trust opens up.
Okay.
And from that place of mental and emotional trust, the physical intimacy, the passion, can naturally begin to flourish again. It follows from that safety.
So if you try to force intimacy or perform in certain ways or just keep pushing for a result without establishing that safety first, that pushes her away. Is that the idea?
According to the source, yes, it absolutely does. It lands as pressure, as a demand, rather than an invitation for connection.
Right.
Jason's aha moment, as described in the material, came when he realized it wasn't his underlying desire for connection that was the problem, but that his tone and his approach, the way he was trying to solve the distance, were landing wrong with his wife, inadvertently eroding the feeling of safety.
Understanding that his tone was the issue rather than his intentions. Wow, that must have been a significant shift in perspective for him. A game changer.
It was huge. The source explains that instead of operating from that place of obligation or the drive to solve the distance, Jason learned a simple way to pivot. He learned how to create an invitation for connection, rooted in creating that feeling of safety first.
An invitation, not a demand or project plan.
Exactly. And the results, according to Jeremy's account, were really quite staggering. Almost hard to believe, but the source lays it out.
Okay, tell us.
They were. Think about where Jason started. Sexless marriage, wife sleeping in another room. The source details that after just one conversation with Jeremy Roadruck on a Sunday, Jason had one conversation with his wife on Wednesday.
Just one conversation with her.
Right.
After understanding this dynamic.
That's what the source reports. One focused conversation where he applied this new understanding. And the wife's response was immediate and profound.
Huh?
According to the account, she came to him differently. She was open mentally, which quickly led to her being open emotionally. And that very night, it led to her being open physically.
Wow. Seriously. From separate bedrooms to physical intimacy in a matter of days, stemming from one conversation rooted in this insight.
That's the transformation described in the source material. It sounds dramatic, but it highlights the power of shifting the core dynamic.
And the source says this wasn't just a one-off.
No, the impact wasn't temporary. Jeremy followed up with Jason 6 months later, and things were still so much better. The change had stuck.
Can you share that vivid anecdote from the source about the thunderstorm? That story really sticks with you as illustrating the depth of the change. It's quite something.
Absolutely. It really paints a picture. Jeremy recounts that Jason was on the porch during a thunderstorm, just taking it in. His wife came out to join him.
Okay.
She paused, and then with a playful smile, apologized for the kids being home. Jason was a bit confused, asking why she was apologizing.
Hey, what's the apology for?
She then looked at him and said, very directly, if our kids weren't here right now, I would totally be making love to you on this table.
Whoa. Okay. That comment is such a powerful indicator of the shift, isn't it? That's not obligation talking.
Not at all. It is. The source uses this story to illustrate that this wasn't a wife back in the same room out of obligation or because things were fixed. This was a wife who was back in her heart, feeling deeply connected and safe.
And playful and initiating.
Exactly, to the point where she was the one initiating playful, sexy connection. It shows a wife pursuing him, which the source presents as evidence of the fundamental shift in dynamic and the reestablishment of deep connection and safety.
And the source stresses that this wasn't the result of months or years of couples therapy or endless arguments hashing things out.
No, that's a key point in the material. Jeremy Roadruck worked only with Jason, not his wife. The transformation stemmed from Jason understanding and applying this core dynamic shift himself.
Just working with him.
Yes. It's presented as a 24-hour reset in terms of the potential time frame for initiating this profound shift in connection. That first conversation was the catalyst.
So for someone listening right now, maybe feeling that quiet struggle, that disconnect, feeling unseen, or just weary of things not changing and not knowing where to even begin, this is where Jeremy's 24-hour marriage reset guide comes in, as presented in the source. This is the tool.
Exactly. The source material explains that Jeremy Roadruck has taken these fundamental frameworks, this understanding of outpacing, the critical need for safety, and the practical steps used with clients like Jason, and distilled them into a guide specifically for men.
And it's called the 24-hour marriage reset.
That's the one.
And what does the source say is actually contained within this guide? What do you get?
According to the source, the guide is a PDF. It clearly explains what outpacing is, and crucially, provides actionable steps on how to stop doing it. So, the what and the how.
Okay.
It covers what the source calls the 3 pivotal frames that can instantly shift the dynamic at home. And perhaps most importantly for many men, the source states it provides the exact words for having that simple, powerful conversation with your wife.
The actual script.
Yeah, the words that can help open her heart and invite that deep connection back. Less guesswork, more clarity.
And the source mentions the potential for seeing results, like bringing her heart back in as little as 24 hours. It's a bold claim, but Jason's story makes it compelling.
It really highlights the power of understanding the underlying dynamic accurately and making a precise, impactful shift in your approach rather than just trying harder using strategies that might inadvertently push her away.
Working smarter, not just harder on the relationship.
You could say that. The source presents it as focusing effort on the right leverage point for rapid change.
And the source material connects this guide and its timing specifically to Father's Day. Tell us about that angle.
It does. The source frames the guide as perhaps the most powerful gift you could give yourself and your family this Father's Day. A marriage reunited, a relationship that feels vibrant, connected, playful, sexy, and fun.
Why does the source suggest this is such a significant gift, especially for a dad? more than, say, a new gadget.
Because, as the material argues, that kind of connected, supportive marriage forms a powerful foundation that positively impacts everything else in your life. It bleeds into your career, how you parent, your overall sense of self-worth.
That makes sense.
The source refers to knowing you are deeply connected with your wife, knowing she genuinely has your back, as kind of secret superpower for a man. It fuels you.
And the source contrasts this with typical Father's Day gifts, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, quite pointedly. It makes the point about how many traditional Father's Day gifts, whether it's, crap tools that gather dust, another tie, or temporary pleasures like a specific beer or meal, they're nice for a moment, sure.
Fleeting.
Right. But they don't fundamentally change the feeling of disconnection or the potential daily drudgery if the core relationship isn't thriving. The guide is presented as offering something that can fundamentally transform the feeling of coming home and being in your own life, day after day.
It's framed as an investment in the most important foundation, not just a one-day thing.
Absolutely. The source strongly encourages taking action. It emphasizes not letting your marriage just slowly fade into nothing. The message is clear. You can't wait around hoping, wishing, or praying for things to magically get better.
Hope isn't a strategy here.
Exactly. Reclaiming the passion and connection requires intentional action, guided by understanding the right dynamics.
And how is this guide accessed according to the source? Is it complicated to get?
The source indicates it's very straightforward. It's a PDF guide delivered digitally via email immediately after purchase.
Instant access.
Pretty much. Jeremy Roadruck even mentions in the source material that you can get it and it can be your little secret, implying the change starts with you, internally, before you even have the conversation.
And what does the source say about the cost? Is it a huge investment?
The source states the price is $2,700 in the U.S. It compares it to the cost of a good dinner for one person.
So, pretty accessible.
Yeah, it's positioned as an accessible investment to upgrade your marriage and transform your home life.
What if someone listening feels like their marriage isn't in crisis like Jason's was, but maybe it's just, okay, good, but not yet truly great or vibrant? Is this still relevant?
The source addresses that directly. It states that the guide is valuable even then. It's presented not as something only for marriages in trouble because someone is at fault or to blame,
right,
but as an invitation to expand the good stuff, to take a good marriage and make it even more powerful, playful, and deeply connected. The framing is explicitly no fault, no blame, no guilt, no shame, just growth.
It sounds like this work is tied into a larger mission for Jeremy Roadruck based on the source, something bigger than just this guide.
It is. The source material highlights Jeremy Roadruck's strong stance against a prevalent narrative he sees, which is the idea that nobody cares about men or about the problems and struggles men face. He really pushes back on that. He points to his various resources, his YouTube content, his courses, free material, and this guide as concrete evidence that support and solutions are available for men.
He's providing the counter evidence.
Exactly. He's actively encouraging men to engage with these resources and, in his words from the source, join him in pushing back against that limiting belief.
So this guide is presented as a specific, actionable tool within that broader effort to empower men to build better lives, starting with their most important relationships.
Exactly. It's framed as providing accessible means for men to make significant positive changes, focusing on the core relationship dynamic as a powerful leverage point for, well, everything else.
Okay, so we've explored the quiet struggle many men face, particularly that disconnect between external success and internal relationship fulfillment. A very common story.
Definitely.
We've delved into the core insight from the source material about outpacing and the critical need for safety first over solutions. That shift seems key.
Absolutely critical.
We looked at the compelling story of Jason as an illustration of the potential for rapid, profound transformation when this dynamic is understood and a simple shift in approach is made.
Yeah, that story is powerful.
And we discussed how the source presents the 24-hour marriage reset guide as distilling these principles into actionable steps, framing it as a powerful, timely investment, particularly relevant around Father's Day.
It really underscores the idea that understanding the underlying dynamics and focusing your energy on the right point of leverage, like shifting from a problem-solving approach to one that prioritizes creating emotional safety, can lead to surprisingly quick and impactful results. As illustrated by the examples in the source material, it's about precision, not just effort.
So, for you listening, reflecting on the material we've explored today, consider the potential impact if your approach and tone shifted, if it moved from trying to fix things or performing towards authentically creating an invitation for connection by prioritizing emotional safety, as the source suggests.
What might change?
Yeah, what might change in your marriage, potentially in the coming hours or days, if you focused on cultivating that feeling of safety first? What aspect of Jason's transformation, from great roommates to that rekindled, passionate connection, stands out most powerfully to you based on this deep dive into the source material? Something to think about.